Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Carly Stone, a filmmaker who got her start as a writer and story editor on Kim's Convenience and made her feature debut with The New Romantic, starring Jessica Barden, in 2018. Her second feature, North of Normal, is an adaptation of See a Sunrise Person's memoir about growing up with an extremely unconventional mother in an extremely unconventional fashion. It premiered at TIFF last September and returns to the Lightbox this Thursday, July 27th, kicking off its run with 2 nights of Q&As with Carly and co-star Sarah Gadon. I'll be moderating the Friday night show at 6:30 p.m. You should come down. Carly picked Celine Song's brilliant new drama Past Lives, which stars Greta Lee as Nora, a young woman who emigrated from Korea to Canada with her mother as a little girl, eventually ending up in New York, married to a very nice man named Arthur. But when Hae-sung, the boy she'd left behind, reconnects with her and announces he's coming to visit, Nora finds herself questioning every choice she's made in her life and thinking about the big choice that might lie in front of her. With a fully felt performance by Lee and pitch-perfect turns from John Magaro and Teo Yu as Arthur and Hae-sung, respectively, it's a rare character piece that explores every facet of its premise and delivers an unforgettable experience. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I actually haven't gone out to the theater a lot, obviously in the past few years, but even since movies have been back, I went for TIFF because my movie was there, but it takes a lot for me to get to the theater. I have to know I'm going to love the movie. I know that's not fair, but that's usually how I get there. Also, I have small kids, so it takes like a lot of organization to get there. But Past Lives was one of those. I have to see it. And I'm so glad I did. I saw it at the TIFF pre-screening, I guess last month or like 6 weeks ago. And usually when I think that a film is bold, the word loud comes to mind. And I thought this film was so bold in its quietness. And it's stayed with me for so long. It still stays with me. And I haven't had a movie like that hang out with me for so long in a long time. And when I had to pick which movie we were going to talk about, Past Lives is one that I couldn't stop talking about to my friends and family. So it felt like the right choice.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love it as well. I think it's one of the best films of this year. And my new life as an exhibitor has changed things. I saw it months ago and then just couldn't talk about it, couldn't say anything about it. And I didn't want to really to spoil it for people. But, when it was at Sundance, there was all this, oh my God, you guys have no idea what's coming. This is such a good film, such a small, perfect little precise story. And at a point right now where we're seeing more and more films by and about transplanted filmmakers or transplanted artists, people who aren't quite at home where they are at home. It felt like it twinned really beautifully with Rice Boy Sleeps. I mean, they're both about Korean expats, but they're also about how children are hostage to their parents' decisions and how the person you are is so dependent on the person you were, but also on things that were completely out of your control when you started to have a personality, started to evolve. And the beauty of this film is that it captures that conversation that we all have between melancholy and nostalgia. Like, nostalgia is a fondness for things that you did, and melancholy is the things that you could have done and didn't do. Right. And everyone has experienced that, whether or not their situation is, similar in any way beyond that to Nora's. It's so simple and so beautiful and so exquisitely acted. Right? I mean, I don't direct. I've never had to pull things out of people or encourage actors to get to a certain place, but I was just watching Greta Lee exist as Nora for half of the picture and just watching her hesitations and watching her little micro expression stuff. This is a movie made for the big screen close-up experience, right? I mean, it's rapturous.
Yeah, it was. I read an interview with Celine Song, who described directing it, maybe directing in general for her, but it was more specifically about this movie, that she was like a composer composing music. And it really felt like that. Like there was so much in Greta Lee's performance when she wasn't speaking, and then the precise moment where she chose to speak, and when it was about the not touching as much as it was about the touching, and it just had this precise, beautiful rhythm that I know like poets and musicians talk about being visited by inspiration, and they just have to capture it and write it down, whether it's a song or a poem. And it felt like this is kind of, it just felt like it came out whole. Obviously it didn't. Making a film is so hard, but she made it look like it just came out of her whole and precise and pure. And the conversations that it brought up, metaphor, like in a bigger sense, but also in the dialogue of like the scene when Arthur and Nora are in bed together. And it's just such a simple, it's a simple composition of a scene, and it's a simple conversation, but he asks her if he makes her world as big as she makes his world. And it's just such a beautiful conversation told so simply. And it's something I think everyone can relate to. Maybe it's not things that are said out loud a lot, but yeah, the film's like, it's quiet, but when it speaks, it's so loud.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up Arthur before I could, because that character in every other version of this story is an obstacle. It was Showalter, wasn't it? Michael Showalter, who made the movie The Baxter. I always confuse it. It's him or David Wayne, but it was Showalter. Mm-hmm. And it's about the guy in the romantic comedy who gets left behind, the guy who's there to be left at the altar and whose only purpose is to be an obstruction, an obstacle to the real love. And the thing that Song does is that she lets us know that he has seen those movies too. That Arthur knows how he's being perceived. And we have that great little opening sequence with the onlookers, somebody eavesdropping on their conversation and just muttering, like, why are they together? And who's that? And it's true. In that moment, he's a Baxter. He's positioned as someone who doesn't match, right? Like on the most basic level, he's not Korean. He doesn't match Nora. He doesn't get her the way that Hae Sung does. They have a shared history that he doesn't have. But from the very first scene where he meets Hae Sung, Arthur starts to recede. And I think that's the genius of it. Like it's exactly what he's saying in the bedroom scene. Like he doesn't want to be the thing that restricts her. And if this is what's going to make her happy, then he has to move away and physically remove himself from there, like give her the space. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation with somebody and they said they didn't buy it. They didn't believe that Arthur would just be passive. And he's not passive. He's afraid. He knows this is the thing that will end his marriage. Like if he gets in the way at all, he'll push her towards him. And I worried briefly when I first saw it. It's like, am I the white guy empathizing with the white guy exclusively? But it just, to me, it feels that I'm seeing a script where all three characters, and a film where all three characters are given equal standing. I mean, Hae Sung has a handful of lines where he sort of goes in this direction and also acknowledges the weight of his presence for Nora. But the scales are always in balance in the movie. The movie sympathizes and empathizes with all three of them. And I think that's why it's so powerful. It's just such an impossible situation for any one of these three people to find themselves in. And ultimately Nora carries it and it's her story, but both men are given equal standing, which is not something most of these movies do.
Yes. And I wouldn't also not describe Arthur as passive. I would describe him as honest. And it's like those honest conversations. It's because he said that, because he's like, I will not stand in your way. It's probably the reason why he doesn't. It's probably the reason why they remain together, and the reason why you respect their relationship and believe it's right for Nora in one version of her life. And it doesn't say which version. I love how the movie's, it's not about regret. It's about creating space to explore and wonder about the other options, and they're not necessarily right or wrong, and making peace with that. And I think that's something that, like the more specific a story is, the more universal it becomes. And this is such an example of that. I think everyone can relate to looking back on their past and wondering if the decisions they made were right or wrong, and what ifs. And like we've seen films and TV shows explore that recently, like that scene in Fleischman is in Trouble comes to mind, where that the girl's like, have I made all the decisions I've already made in my life?
Yeah.
And this past lives doesn't feel like it takes any cynicism with asking that question, which I loved.
Yeah, it's a film that is open to not just possibilities, but the possibility of understanding the possibilities. And again, it's a note that isn't played in a lot of movies. And I started wondering why, just because it's potential is a fascinating subject, right? Like missed potential, wasted potential, seething potential, people who may yet become the best version of themselves. Like that's the heart of drama, really. And watching Celine Song just put that there and leave it there for us to consider in every scene, it feels like the best way in. And maybe that's it. Nobody's ever really wanted to risk stasis, to risk just sitting with someone while they have these conversations with themselves. And it's so powerful.
Yeah. And this movie feels so confident in what it wants to explore that as a viewer, you get to be so patient with it. And yeah, I just found that the precision of the scenes and the soundtrack was like, it was just, it exists. It kind of exists in the past and the present at the same time. It feels quite timeless, but it feels current as well with the way she jokes about even how she jokes with Arthur, like about Inyan at first, and she undercuts it, and she's like, "It's just what Korean people say to sleep with someone," and then it's actually no, it's not. It's what the whole movie's about, and it's something that's a huge cornerstone of this, like the belief system that we're asked to subscribe to, and what people already subscribe to, and I love that it was so it had like it was like a pulse on the now with like Cat Powers rendition of Stay, but like in the past with like Van Morrison and Leonard Cohen. It had everything for me.
Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. This week, I'll be writing about Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid and the complicated legacy of the Mission Impossible movies, among other things. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link in the Semcast Twitter account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. I do want to talk about the performances as well. The mood of the film is exceptional, and it's a remarkable accomplishment. And I hope Celine Song gets all the awards that people can pile onto her. But the performances, they're equally, if not more so, important in conveying this. And I had not seen Greta Lee in a leading role before. I love her work. She had that great episode of What We Do in the Shadows, and of course there's Russian Doll and all the other stuff. But the way that she lets Nora just sort of simmer in moments, and again, Song is allowing the space for that very, very clearly. But she holds the screen so confidently without a shred of confidence. Like that's the thing. You're watching this person not know what to do for the entire film. She knows who she is and she knows what she wants, and she doesn't know how to get there. They all understand how tenuous the relationships are and how one person's decision can change their entire lives as adults. But none of them seems to accept that they're the ones who might make the decision. Like they're all three of them are waiting for the other person to make a move. And that's what's so exquisite, the tension of that under every conversation, in every interaction. And all three of these actors are just like it's a dance. They're moving back and forth in the frame with one another and almost reaching out and then not, or they are, and then they're missed and doing things that, the casual moments where Arthur just steps back while Hae-sung and Nora start speaking in Korean, and Nora tries to translate, but then sort of gives up, and he's aware that she stopped trying, but he lets it happen. And it feels so quietly heartbreaking, especially as the conversation gets more and more emotionally intense. And he's clearly aware of it. Arthur sees that, but he won't interrupt because he doesn't want to be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And in that scene, he disappears for them. And the film lets us see it. It lets us see how they don't really notice that it's happening. And I've been in situations where I catch up with an old friend with someone else around, and yeah, it gets weird. And afterwards you say, oh, hey, I'm sorry, I forgot. I didn't include you in that. Mm-hmm. But it's so weighted here, not just with the friendship, but with time and with longing and with everything
with
else.
The language. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like with the performances, it feels like they're discovering at the same time we're discovering as audience members. It feels like Greta Lee as Nora it doesn't feel like she's going into meeting Arthur being like, oh, look, here's going to be like my husband and we're going to have this long life together. She's just like, I'm on a writer's retreat. I'm kind of drunk. That like, it's unpredictable. You watch her discover him in the moment. You watch her be like, when she reunites with Hae-sung, you don't know if she's going to throw her whole life away for him, if she's going to be totally disappointed and embarrassed that she almost did throw her life away for him.
Yeah.
You're with her the whole time as she's coping with it and going back and forth with it. And that's just a crazy thing for an actor to pull off, the realness of it, of the moment to moment wavering.
Yeah. And it's something that, again, we've all been there. We've all had a version of that happen to us. And so I get as you say, the specificity makes it more universal, but at the same time, it's such a huge risk to do something like this as a narrative choice, because if you get it wrong, everyone will know. Like every audience everywhere will know if this is a false note. And this is Celine Song's first feature. She's a stage director. It is such a hard transition. I have seen so many movies by theater people that are very miscalibrated for the screen, right? Like they go for bigger performances, or they don't trust the audience without a score to help them along, or there's a lot of telegraphing. And it's always just like, oh, right. You don't understand the intimacy of the form that you're working with.
Yeah.
And she nails it. She is just instantly brings us into the world and just leaves us there. And it's hauntingly good.
And that's why I love that it's still only in theaters, because it is something that really, you really have to see it on the big screen, because you can see the flinches and the blinks and the shifting eyes, and it's just something that wouldn't translate unless you have the setup that you have over there. But and for me, like, preparing to talk about it with you, I was like, it's not like I can go rewatch it. I can't get to a theater right now. It's just something that has stayed in my head, which is a really, it used to be how you experience movies, but it was cool to have that experience again, especially with a movie like this.
Yeah. Even at home, even in a setup like this, you've got, like, the dog is going to make a noise, or your phone will buzz or something. It's increasingly impossible to isolate yourself with a movie the way that I want to, like the way that most of us ought to be doing. But there is a generation that's grown up with the distraction everywhere, and now doesn't, I hate saying it, but doesn't pay attention. And seeing a film at the Lightbox where our audiences are still kind of reverent feels like a miracle, frankly, that we can do that. Every time I'm there for a secret movie club and people get quiet for a drama, it's so good. It feels so good.
Yeah, quiet for a drama is something. My first movie was a comedy, and I didn't have the experience of watching my movie with a quiet for a drama.
Sure.
And I didn't really know about it as a filmmaker, but like, you want quiet for a drama.
But it's terrifying too. I know at
It's
the first
terrifying. I mean,
screenings.
why is everybody quiet? But as a viewer sitting in the quiet, it's a seat shift that you notice, and you're like the energy in the room when you're watching a drama like Past Lives. You notice this seat shifts. You notice a phone light. You just want everything to be totally still.
Yeah, and we will have that for North of Normal, I promise. Which actually brings me to that, because I realized as I'm talking to you, oh, of course, you made a movie about children who were hostage to their parents. I mean, that's ultimately what North of Normal is in its uh, taking a conventional coming of age structure and applying it to an extremely unconventional story, which is also true in this case. And Past Lives is semi autobiographical, at least I'm led to understand.
Yeah.
That's kind of an interesting parallel line as well. What I usually ask to towards the end of an episode is, like if you've lifted or borrowed or outright stolen anything. Obviously, in this case, Past Lives is post your film, so that's not going to be a thing. But we can talk about the resonance if you want, the sense that you're placing our dramatic satisfaction in the hands of characters who will not behave the way everyone would behave. Like it is the opposite of Past Lives in that way, in that it's similar. It's sort of a prequel or the first movement of Nora's story, where she really doesn't have a say in anything that happens, and she's moving with her mother because her mother is moving, and that's sort of all of your film.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Past Lives gives me hope for quiet drama's resonance compared to the flashy, not that I don't love flashy loud movies, but that they could succeed or connect just as much. But yeah, North of Normal does relate in that it's the you see the young girl doesn't have a say in how she's brought up, and then the movie is about her learning to have a say and what her say is and how it conflicts with her parents, and how it not her parents, with her mother and her grandparents, and how that conflict shapes the rest of her life. So she's not transplanting from a place like Korea, but she is transplanting culturally because she's going from living off the grid, cut off from civilization, to living in a city for the first time when she's a teenager, which is like a very big fish out of water setup.
Yeah, and one that would be terrifying to a young person too. Like I keep forgetting, or we keep forgetting collectively, that teenagers just aren't people yet. I mean, they have personalities, but they're children. They are still children. And your film really gets that in a way that I think a few other movies might have missed. That it's not that she's not socialized. She's not, but she's not socialized, but she's also completely undeveloped, right? Like it's the inability to process the overload and the urge to rush back into safety, where we can understand as an audience that it's not safe, that the way she's been raised it's not neglectful exactly, but it's not prepared her in any way for the world that she is about to exist in forever. Yeah. And as a transition, as a coming of age movie, like that's just like being thrown into not the shallow, like, there's the shallow end and the deep end of the metaphor, but this is like the deep end. It's filled with sharks. The sharks are driving cars. Like everything about it is terrifying. And there's a lyricism to your film that I was really surprised by, that we still get to share her initial perspective and watch that shape change over the course of the film.
Right. And it's interesting when you see like she can't run back to her safety because she's quickly learning that her safety wasn't safe. Mm-hmm. And so her life jacket's ripped off her in the shark infested waters, which I'm sure back to the specificity leading to universal resonance. I'm hoping people who haven't been raised off the grid can still feel how terrifying it is to grow up.
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, I had a completely ordinary suburban upbringing, except for a couple of things which again, when you grow up as a child, you just assume everybody has the same experience, right? Like you don't understand that people live differently, better, worse, however you want to rank it, but you just assume that whatever's happening to you is what always happens to people. And then you meet other people who introduce you to a bigger, stranger existence than you ever imagined. And that comes across. The center perspective exploding outwards, or the perspective being destroyed by reality, right? And we'll talk about this on Friday night. The cast is essential to this, right? Like it's not the movie's perspective, it's the way that, again, the actors carry the thread and demonstrate these things. They have to physically enact the metaphors, really. And I mean, I know Sarah a little. I have watched her career for over a decade, and I don't think I've ever seen her try something like this, and it's a blast. It's just so good to watch her be that different.
That's what I loved about working with her on this, was getting to play with a side in her craft that I don't think she has gotten the opportunity, or just hasn't been the project like this where she is playing this character. And it was so exciting to work with her for this character, Michelle, who was the character, even though the story is about Sia, it was Sia's mom, Michelle, that made me really want to make this movie. I found her to be such a compelling character filled with contradictions. You don't know which way she's going to go. And I really loved playing with that. And like that in past lives, what you're saying in a totally different way, but Greta Lee, you don't know which way she's going to go ever. And I think that's my favorite type of movie, is just constantly overturning expectations.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the energy too of casting a comic actor or an actor known for comedy in a dramatic role, right? Because the energy is so completely different, both in your expectation and in the actor's performance, because they will find choices that just haven't been done before.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tension of the performances. And again, it's like casting Sarah in a role like that is something that is just unexpected enough to keep us on edge a little tiny bit. And it destabilizes a recognizable genre structure, which is the kind of thing that I'm seeing more and more often now. And I love it. I love not being able to predict where something is going for the first time in decades.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
My thanks to Carly Stone, whose new film North of Normal opens this Thursday, July 27th, across Canada. In Toronto, it's at the TIFF Bell Lightbox, with Q&As with Carly and Sarah Gadon Thursday and Friday nights. I'm hosting the Friday night event at 6:30 p.m. Tickets are still available at tiff.net. Thanks also to Kate Parks. She knows what she did. Carly is not on Twitter. I'm still calling it that. But you can find past lives in theaters now, including at the Lightbox, where it's having a really great run. It'll be on disc eventually, but you know the deal. Movies like this are so much better in a proper theater. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you next week.